Hello, and welcome to Mary Spring Nature Center's Tuesday Talks. I'm John Fromer, your host and the program director. Today's talk is generously sponsored by Camden River House, Camden National Bank, and Rennie's A Maine Adventure. Mary Spring is open every day of the year, dawn to dusk, free of charge. And you can visit Mary Spring online anytime at maryspring.org on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Mary Spring's mission is to practice, teach, and advocate sound principles of ecology, conservation, and horticulture in order to protect our natural environment and to provide natural landscapes and cultivated areas for public enjoyment. There are many benefits to being a member of Mary Spring Nature Center, including free admission to our spring, summer, and winter lecture series, 10% discount on most purchases, a share of the stewardship, and reciprocating privileges to more than 345 gardens nationwide. Mary Spring is a 501c3 nonprofit organization primarily funded through memberships, grants, and donations. You can donate securely online at maryspring.org. You can give us a call with your credit card at 207-236-2239 or mail your check made out to Mary Spring Nature Center and send it to P.O. Box 893, Camden, Maine 04843, and we thank you. This program was previously recorded on Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025, entitled Gulf of Maine Birds and presented by Bob Duchesne. Previously recorded Tuesday talks uploaded to Mary Spring's YouTube channel are generously sponsored by the Cascade Foundation.
Well, hi, my name is Bob Duchesne. Just by way of quick introduction, I was a radio disc jockey for much of my life. I later deviated into politics and spent 6 terms in the Maine State House of Representatives. I'm currently in the Board of Environmental Protection, the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Advisory Council. But this story starts back in first grade because when I was just barely able to look up over the sill of the window, I would see the goldfinches out on the lawn, and they were so yellow. And the grass was green from just having rained overnight. And there was a big flock of them out there. And from that day on, I have been hooked on birds. And that has taken me quite a fascinating route to this point where I'm going to talk to you today. Along the way, I developed the Maine Birding Trail. I wrote a book about some of the best places to go birding in Maine. Mary Spring is on it. And as John mentioned, I now do a lot of YouTube videos, not only to say where to bird, but also how to bird. So I've been doing a lot of birding. And in the course of that, I've been getting offshore more and more. And in the last 5 years, I said, oh man, this is so good. I got to tell other people about it. The Gulf of Maine is unique. I think I would have to go to Alaska to find something the equivalent of this. Maybe there's some places in Newfoundland who get quite this intense, but for reasons I'll explain, we've actually got a gift here that almost nobody, including people from Maine, know about. I'm always fascinated to find out how many native Mainers, people born and raised and have been here for decades, have never seen a puffin or never seen a whale, when they're all out there in pretty big numbers and easy to do. So I'm going to explain that and demystify what is out there in the Gulf of Maine. So let's start with the backstory here. This is what the Earth looked like 25,000 years ago at the height of the glacial period. And as you can see, the ice cap actually went all the way down to New Jersey. And over Maine, it was huge. The mile ice was really a mile over Katahdin, maybe 2 miles thick in places. And it went all the way out to sea. So as a result, you've got the Gulf of Maine that looks like this sort of basin there with Cape Cod down in the lower left side, Nova Scotia up there on the top right. And then you've got this area in here called George's Bank, which was such an important, because it's shallow and for a number of other reasons, it was a fish breeding ground that provided cod to Europe for centuries. And this is what the English and French really fought over for many years while we were colonizing the U.S. Um, but this area, this shallow spot, helps define why the birding and all the other wildlife that's out in the Gulf of Maine is so good. If you look, this is what the basin actually looks like. And there's George's Bank. There's also a Scotian Shelf and a small channel that runs between it called Northeast Channel. That George's Bank, back when the Earth was a little bit colder, 100 years ago during the whaling period, um, it was shallow enough that the ice would freeze out there and they could get off the boat and play baseball or whatever it is they did back then out there 300 miles out in the ocean. And this is why it's so cold. We have the Gulf Stream, which carries equatorial water up towards Europe. That's why London, which is at a latitude much further north than us, stays warm and doesn't snow very much. All that warm air is carried by the Gulf Stream over to Europe, and we get the Labrador Current seeping down the coast and in through that channel into the Gulf of Maine. So we have cold water compared to what we could have had at other places. And cold water holds more oxygen. And because it holds more oxygen, it breeds more critters. And the more critters you got, the bigger a food supply you have for anything that wants to feed on it. So we have a lot of the plankton and zooplankton and all the small krill that's out there. And we also have a very rough coastline with lots of islands. 5 of those islands are breeding colonies for Atlantic puffins. This is the only place in the United States where you find Atlantic puffins. There are a lot more puffins north of us in Canada. There are so many in Iceland, they eat them. So it's not a rare bird by any means, but from here on south, there aren't any. We've got them all in the U.S. And there are 5 islands. And those islands can have an awful lot of puffins on them. And they are cute. People think that they're the size of penguins. They're not. They're about the size maybe of pigeons, but they're adorable and relatively tame. They'll fly right by the boat that you're on. They'll be swimming in the water near you. They are just cute. And we also have members of that family too that are called alcids. They're all in the same family. That includes razorbills, which are also out the coast here. We have murres, common murre down here. There's also a thick-billed murre that the closest place I know that nests is in Witless Bay, Newfoundland. And we get some of those down here in the winter too. But these are all part of the alcid family related to puffins, and they are out in the Gulf of Maine. So the first island, the southernmost island, is visited quite a bit because it's not far offshore at all, and 3 different boats go there. It's Eastern Egg Rock, and they go out of Port Clyde, the Monhegan Boat Line, Hardy Boat, New Harbor, and Captain Fish out of Booth Bay Harbor. If you're taking notes and you want to figure out which boat to get on, I think my recommendation would be the Hardy Boat out of New Harbor because it's the closest to the island and they can get out there in a real hurry. And if anyone's prone to seasickness, you probably wouldn't have a problem on that one. So, but all 3 of them, get out to Eastern Egg Rock and you will see puffins. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're out there nesting. The other thing this island is particularly good for is an endangered species called a roseate tern. Of all the islands, these terns like to be on Eastern Egg Rock. So when I go out to see puffins on that island, I'm actually looking for this guy because he's not easy to get, a roseate tern. And that's on Eastern Egg Rock. Matinicus Rock. Matinicus was the Native American word for far out island. And it's so far out that no commercial boat goes there for touring the puffins. The island is pretty barren. It would be a long trip out and a long trip back. And it's the most exposed of the islands because it is so far out. So there aren't any puffin trips to go to that one. There's only one right now that goes to a similar island, also about 9 miles offshore, and that's Seal Island. And the Idaho Ferry does trips all summer. They, I think, go on Sundays. They also have some Wednesday trips they do once you get into July. And I actually get on that boat and spot for them quite often. I'll do it at least a dozen times this coming year. That one is a fun boat, which we may talk about again later. But if you want to take a real puffin watching adventure, get on that one, the Idaho Ferry from Stonington. And this is also the biggest island. The island has quite a history because through World War II and really into the 1960s, this was a bombing range. And so there are probably still unexpended ordnance on that island somewhere. There are warning signs where all the biologists have to stay out of certain areas. And the bomb blasts were so bad that they broke the windows in Idaho, dozens of miles away. But it's a puffin colony now. And not just puffins, it's also the second largest gray seal pupping colony in the United States. The other ones, I think, is off Martha's Vineyard. But that's out here at Seal Island. And these guys breed in big numbers in the second half of winter. You can actually see a gray seal down here floating amidst all these common eiders and their babies. So Seal Island is well named because of the seals out there. It also is the largest and southernmost great cormorant colony. There is no colony further south in the United States. So this is it. There's, I'm going to say 40 to 50 nests out there of great cormorants, which is the largest cormorant in the world. Seal Island has them. Next one up is Petit Manan Island. And a bunch of boats go there, a couple out of Bar Harbor, including Bar Harbor Whale Watch, which is a good boat to get on. Probably, I think maybe the best bargain and the best puffin boat tour that you can easily get on is Acadia Puffin Cruise. It goes out of Steuben, and they're only about a half an hour away from the island. So even in iffy conditions for other boats, they can scoot out there and scoot back as needed. And because it's a fairly short trip, they can get in 3 a day and charge you less than you might get on another boat. So of all my favorites, Acadia Puffin Cruise is in the top 3. Another one that's fun to get on, they can only take 6 passengers, so it's a real intimate experience, and that's Robertson Sea Tours out of Millbridge. And that's to Petit Manan, home of the second largest lighthouse in Maine. I think it's 217 feet tall. Boone Island off the southern coast is a little bit bigger than that. But this is Petit Manan, which is just north of Schoodic Point in Acadia National Park. One of the reasons that one is a little more interesting is because this probably is the southernmost place along the coast where the common murre nests, or at least tries to every year. There's probably 2 or 3 attempts every year from those birds. Really, the last island up, which is Machias Seal Island, has the biggest colony of all these species. And there's only one boat that currently goes out there now, and that's Bold Coast Charter out of Cutler. That one is so popular because that island is so spectacular that if you don't make reservations as soon as the tickets go on sale first beginning of the year, you don't get to go. It fills up right away. There is another boat that comes out of Grand Manan, Sea Watch Tours, which also visits the island. They sell out a little slower, but their season is also pretty popular. But if you ever want to go to Machias Seal Island, that's the one where you can land on the island and stay in blinds so that you can watch the puffins right at arm's length. And by arm's length, I mean you could reach out of that blind and touch them. They know you're in there, but they're so used to people being in there that it just doesn't spook them. And from the air, this is what Machias Seal Island looks like. Puffins like crazy. Just an unbelievable number of puffins out there. And it's also a big colony of razorbills, as you can see, just loafing in the rocks. And again, this is right outside the blind. You can't get this experience at any of the other islands, but you can out there. And the common murres are out there. There's a bridled form, which has the eye spectacles, but they're the same bird. But they're out there in the biggest numbers too. And black guillemots are the other alcid member that I haven't talked about. These you can usually see right close to the coast, and they don't wander off in winter. They're along the coast right now all the time. So if you wanted to go out and see one this afternoon, you could. We have a bunch of gulls out in the Gulf of Maine that are worth mentioning. The one that everybody is familiar with is the herring gull. Second most popular gull out there is the great blackback gull. You'll see a lot of those. Ringbill gull, that's an interesting one. These don't get out very deep in the Gulf very much because it really is a freshwater nesting bird. We get a lot of them. They're in the parking lot of McDonald's, shopping centers, you name it. That's where they are till right about now. And as the ice starts to thaw up in the lakes of northern Maine and into Canada, they'll go up there and nest on fresh water and then come down again. So they're along the coast. You can see them. You can go out and see them right now, but they're going to start to melt away a little bit. And they won't be out in the Gulf too far because they're not terribly fond of the deeper water. Fourth most common gull that's out in the Gulf of Maine is laughing gull. Petit Manan is the largest colony. This is a gull that's really abundant all the way down at the Everglades in Florida. So it's very much a coastal bird all along the eastern seaboard of the United States. And we get a lot of them in Maine. The biggest colony is Petit Manan. Black-legged kittiwake. Now we're getting interesting, or more interesting. This one does not nest on the east coast of the U.S. It almost does. There was a colony just north of Eastport on the Canadian side of the border. And that was the closest nesting colony for black-legged kittiwakes. Some kind of weasel or mink or something got out there and chased them all off. So they haven't bred there in about 4 years. They are probably out in the Wolves, which is another island group that is between Canada and Grand Banaan. But they do get into the Gulf of Maine regularly, and we do see them. So this is another member of the Gulf family that we see out there in the Gulf of Maine. This one is a lesser blackback gull, and it must have an interesting story. As far as we know, we don't know of any nesting place in the U.S., but in winter, they're starting to show up in big numbers along the coast. So they're coming from somewhere, and it's probably Greenland. So when they come south for the winter, it looks like it's us. And this was really a very uncommon bird until recent years. And now if I go down to, let's say, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, they're all over the beaches. A bird that doesn't even nest in the continental North America. But now we're starting to see them more. It's a smaller version of the great blackback gull. It's got yellow legs as opposed to the pink legs. And we see them on those whale watch boats and other adventures offshore. And we sometimes see them inshore right along the coastline. But they are in the Gulf of Maine now, where they really didn't used to be very much. And the other one is Bonaparte's gull, which is an interesting one. You don't see them in deep water very much, but you get them along the shore a lot. This is another freshwater nesting gull. They nest all across Canada. And this is the only gull that nests in trees. They actually take over the expired nests of old nests of other birds, thrushes and things, and they can nest in those. And they come in big numbers. They will flood through in the Gulf of Maine. And in the fall, in Head Harbor Passage around Campobello, between Eastport and Campobello, you might see 10,000 of these guys because they just collect in there. So all this, gull-wise, is going on in the Gulf of Maine. We also have 3 species of tern to be aware of, and one of them is the common tern, which is the most common of the bunch. They nest at a bunch of offshore islands, including all of these puffin colonies. There's the Arctic tern, which is also out there. They really nest in the same place and much in the same way as the common terns out there. And so we do have a good number of those on any of these puffin islands. And then we have that roseate tern, which, as I mentioned, is an endangered bird. We don't have many of those. They have a slightly different nesting strategy, and our islands aren't as good for them as they might be somewhere else. But the fact is they've dwindled everywhere across the world. So they've been having challenges in recent years. But we do have them in the Gulf of Maine. And as I say, Eastern Egg Rock is the best place to see them. This is the most offshore lighthouse along the coast in the Gulf of Maine. This is Mount Desert Rock. As you can see, the house has suffered over the years, but they have College of the Atlantic students out there. And God, they see everything from that island. I'm envious sometimes about how much I might like to stay on that island for a little while just to watch everything going around, because they are right out where all the wildlife collects. They can watch the whales from the rocks. They can watch all the exotic seabirds. A lot of the wandering rarities end up out there because it's the first land that some of these birds see. So this is going on out in the Gulf of Maine, these offshore islands. Now we talk a little bit about some of the pelagic birds that are out there. This is, well, let me go back to that one. These are phalaropes, western and not west, redneck. Yeah, sorry, redneck phalaropes out here. These nest in freshwater potholes all across Canada, and then it will come down in huge numbers. Now you'll see flocks of 100 to 1,000 sometimes out in the Gulf of Maine in the fall as they collect out there. It's technically a shorebird, but they've adapted to life on water, and so we'll see big flocks out there. Close up of what they look like. We do, of course, have whales, and this is the whale watch boat that comes out of, I think it's Kennebunkport down there. Here's what's going on out in the Gulf of Maine and why there's so much whale watching activity out here. Not only is the water cold and breeding a lot of food, but the bottom of the ocean is very uneven. So you get these ridges, and some of these ridges are really famous. And all that tidal water, and remember, it's about a 10-foot tide in Bar Harbor, about a 20-foot tide in Lubec. All that tidal water goes over these ridges and gets pushed up. And so it pushes all this undersea food up closer to where the whales and other sea life can get it. So you'll see all this activity as the tide is turning. At mid tide, as it's racing in or racing out, that's when it's busiest. At low tide and high tide, sometimes the whales and the birds just sit around waiting for the tide to change. So those tides can start pushing the food their way again. And these ridges are famous. So if you go to these ridges, that's where you're most likely to find the whales. And the whale watch boats know it. As a result, most of the whales and the sea life out there is predictable, and they seldom miss. It's remarkable how adept they are at finding the sea life that is out there. And some of these are very famous. The whale watch boats out of southern Maine go to Jeffrey's Ledge. There's Columbia Ledge, which is part of that whole Seal Island, Matinicus Rock group. Scudic Ridge is where the Bar Harbor boats tend to go out of. In recent years, the whales have been wandering a little bit more because of the water's warming up, and we'll get to that. But Grand Manan Banks is really productive. There's a great upwelling out there. And I had one of my best whale watch trips ever out there this last summer. Now, it's not just whales. White-sided dolphins are, sometimes I think they're more entertaining than the whales are because they are really energetic. They are doing exactly this, diving. They will play with the bow of the boat. They'll get in the waves and swim along with you. They'll come right up to you and take a look. And they could be out there in big numbers. White-sided dolphin, Atlantic white-sided dolphin. Common dolphins are out there too, which I frankly did not know until I did the Maine Audubon pelagic trip out of Bar Harbor this last September. And we had just an awesome day. And it was my first look at common dolphins that are out there as well. Whales. This is the minke whale, the smallest of the whales we have. This is a finback whale, which is the largest one we have. It's second only to the blue whale, which rarely gets into the Gulf of Maine. I think there's been one sighting in the last 5 years that I can think of. So blue whales not here, but fin whales are. And these are the greyhounds of the sea. They are very fast underwater. They can dive and then come up a mile away. So they can be a little challenging for the whale watch boats to get on and stay on unless they're feeding in a particular area. But finback or fin whales are out there in reasonable numbers. And then, of course, the humpbacks, which I think are the most entertaining. Now, the humpbacks are one reason they're entertaining is because every humpback whale has a name. These undertail patterns are recognizable, and they have catalogs of photos. They just wait for the tail to pop up so they can compare the photo, and they know the name of the whale they're looking at on these whale watch boats. And I've met a bunch of whales that come back into the Gulf of Maine a number of times. I think Owl was one of my favorites because she has a calf regularly, and she's a female. She brings her calf up from the Caribbean. All these whales, by the way, are coming up here to fatten up in summer. The humpback whales actually breed down the Caribbean. And when they leave Maine waters, they are so fat from all they've been eating that they don't eat again until they return. They spend all winter down there not eating and even making milk for the calves without nourishment because they fattened up so much of the abundance we have up here. So they go down there, then they migrate back up here. And they breed out in the Gulf of Maine because of all the food and cold water we have out here. Pilot whales. I'd seen them elsewhere, but I'd not seen them in the Gulf of Maine until this year. This last fall on that same pelagic trip, we had a nice big pot of pilot whales out there. I've seen them off the coast of Canada and the Canadian provinces, but that's actually the first time I'd seen them in Maine water, so I was pretty thrilled. They are out there. Seals are out there. As I mentioned, we have the second largest gray seal pupping colony. We have a lot of pupping colonies for harbor seals. And that has caused a bit of a change in the Gulf of Maine. We didn't used to have a lot of great white shark sightings, but because the food supply of seals is so good, which is their favorite food, these guys are starting to show up more often. They were likely always here, but they're becoming a little more prevalent. Because there are so many gray seals down off Cape Cod that they're starting to get worried around the beaches where people famously go swimming. So white sharks are becoming more prevalent. They are showing up in Head Harbor Passage almost regularly. Not enough to take tours out to sea, but tour boats are seeing them regularly. And then Captain Garrett Aldrich of the Idaho Ferry had his family out this last summer on a Sunday on one of the offshore islands on a beach, and they were swimming, and they were not too far from seals when Garrett noticed there was this funnel of water. Something was swimming around not far from them at all, leaving this little funnel in the water. Little, you could see where something was swimming underneath, and it was big. And he came to realize that there were two white sharks just about where they were swimming, right off on shore of one of these islands. So we have them now in bigger numbers than we used to because the seal population is doing so well, and the sharks have figured that out. Still not a real problem, but pay attention, watch this space. Biggest one out there is the basking shark. It's the second largest shark in the world. The whale shark is bigger, but this one is eats krill. It's like a whale. It's a feeder of small stuff and doesn't threaten people at all. This one actually jumps out of the water like a breaching whale does too. Every now and then it surprises the living daylights out of me when one jumps out of the water, because they are the size of a minke whale. They're just huge. This one is a blue shark. This actually, when I'm on a whale watch boat out with Bar Harbor Whale Watch, I will see this one more than any other shark. They're just lazily swimming along the water, right on the surface, soaking up a little sun. And you know it's them because those two fins are far enough apart that it's like the sails of a two-masted ship funneling through the water. And you look down and there's the shark attached to it. They're out there, but I don't know if there's ever been a shark attack from one of these guys. The one that's most common out there is actually the porbeagle. It's actually a very common shark in Maine, but it's relatively small, has never really threatened anybody. And as far as I know, no one's ever been bitten. There's even been some talk about making them a food source at some point, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. But we do have sharks, probably a dozen different species existing in the Gulf of Maine off and on. Another one that's out there and is becoming more comfortable being there is the mola mola, or ocean sunfish. It's the largest bonefish in the world. It looks like a fish that's only a head with a couple of big fins, and it eats almost exclusively jellyfish. But they're enormous. It's the size of a Honda Civic and weighs nearly the same thing. They're just enormous out there, and they just lazily swim along the surface looking for jellyfish. And because the water is warming up, we're getting more jellyfish, and that means more mola mola. We also have bluefin tuna out there, and you'll see the tuna boats out when you're out in the Gulf of Maine regularly. These are the prize tuna. I think the one sold last year in Japan, not one of ours, but one of these sold in Japan for $800,000 because bluefin tuna is really prized, especially for sushi, and it's high quality. So we do have them here in the Gulf of Maine. They do fish for them out there. Northern gannet. I passed by this bird a little bit earlier. We'll talk about the pelagic birds again, because all these pelagic birds are most likely coming from somewhere else. And I'll show you where they're coming from. So northern gannet's going to be the largest bird we see out there, a wingspan of, I don't know, 6 to 8 feet. And we have two nesting colonies over here, if you can see my pointer, up in Newfoundland and Witless Bay, Mary's Point, Cape St. Mary, and also in the Gaspé Peninsula in Quebec. Those are the two big colonies, and it's the only place they nest. They may try occasionally looking at some other islands, but the northern gannets breed there, and there are more breeding colonies over in northern Europe. And that's it. They are colonial nesters in huge, huge numbers. And then ours stream back down through the Gulf of Maine. We see them all the time off in the whale watch and puffin watch boats. Late summer, they're streaming by in migration, and they'll go all the way down the eastern seaboard. Some will even stay out in the Gulf of Maine all winter, but mostly they go south to warmer waters and then come back up. And they take their time going back and forth because the food supply is so plentiful out in the Gulf of Maine. Wilson storm petrel. This is maybe one of the most numerous birds in the world. They nest on all these tiny islands in the South Atlantic. So it's coming all the way up to the Gulf of Maine when it's winter down there and summer up in our backyard because the food supply is so good. And they come in by the thousands. You'll see big, big flocks of these guys. They nest off the coast of Antarctica. Falkland Islands is one of the places they go. So that's where they all nest, right down very low below the equator, and then stream up here, and they start showing up about mid to late May. The first wave will arrive. We also have our own form of petrel, storm petrel. It's a Leach's storm petrel. This does breed right off the coast. In fact, we may have one of the bigger breeding colonies in the U.S., but they're nocturnal, so we don't see them all that much. They nest in burrows on some of the offshore islands, and Great Duck and Little Duck islands off Acadia National Park are known colonies for big numbers of them. They go out to sea, forage in the dark, and then come back and bring it into the burrows. So we don't see them much until later in the year when they start to get off the nests. Then we've got the shearwaters. These guys are special. They're called shearwaters because they're about the size of a small gull with very stiff, shallow wing beats, and they like to fly right along the surface of the water, almost dipping a wing in like they're shearing the water. And so they got the name shearwater. This is a great shearwater. And almost all of them, it's a really abundant bird, and almost all of them nest in this one island group down here where the arrows are, called Tristan da Cunha. And that's between South America and South Africa. It's the most remotely inhabited place on Earth. There's a small village out there with people on it. And otherwise, it is the biggest colony of a very abundant bird, all right there, and a little bit over around the Falkland Islands. But so many of them, and they all come up the Gulf of Maine. It's the shearwater most likely to be seen out there on all these whale watch boats. And we see them on puffin trips too. Sooty shearwater, it's another South Atlantic breeder. These guys, again, some of them come from off the Falkland Islands and the southern part of Argentina. That's where they're coming from. There are some out in an island group out here. And then they come up into the Gulf of Maine in pretty big numbers. There's also another whole section of colonies over in New Zealand and Australia, on the western side, or eastern side of Australia. Those go up the Pacific coast, so I suspect we don't see any of those in the Atlantic, but you do see a lot of them up here, Oregon, Alaska. But that's where they're coming from. Our colonies of sooty shearwaters are coming all the way up from the southern tip of Argentina to get into the Gulf of Maine because the food is so good. This one is a northern Atlantic breeder, mostly on the other side of the pond. It's very much a European bird. Every now and then they try to nest over here, and I think annually at least one pair tries to nest on Matinicus Rock. But it's a Manx shearwater, the smallest and fastest of the bunch that we see out here. And this is where they can nest and have nested. Mostly it's European, mostly around the United Kingdom. And then we've got a few of them trying over here, but that's pretty unusual. Cory's shearwater is getting over here in bigger numbers, quite possibly because the Gulf of Maine is continuing to warm up a little bit. Cory's shearwater is a Mediterranean bird that comes across the ocean after they're done breeding. And we start to see those even in June, but certainly later on in summer. And the biggest colony, I think, is down around Morocco and around Portugal. Then there's colonies inside the Mediterranean as well. And we see those in the Gulf of Maine. Didn't used to see them at all. It took me years to get my first one out there. And now I can't say I get them on every trip, but I'm starting to. This is the great shearwater on the left, which you've already met. On the right is a northern fulmar. That is the farthest northern of these birds that have tube noses. And by tube nose, I mean they're adapted for life at sea, where the water that they consume is always salty, and they've got to get rid of that extra salt. So they have tubes on their noses that secrete the salt that they take in by drinking the water and eating the fish or the sea life out there. So they're called tube noses. And many of the birds you've just seen are in that same big group of tube noses, using that tube in the beak to secrete the excess salt. The northern fulmar is the farthest northern of all these breeders. And if you see, it's way up, really an Arctic breeder in most places. There's some that nest around the United Kingdom, maybe a very small handful on the east side of Newfoundland. Other than that, Greenland and further north than that. And they will come down in significant numbers, but because they're traveling so far, we don't really start to see them until mid-September and even into October. And then we'll start to see them more often out in the Gulf. Then we have some bully birds out there. These are kleptoparasites. They're birds that make their living by stealing food from other birds. They're not all that big, but they're really powerful and they're really mean. And this is the Pomeranian Jaeger. Pomeranian Jaegers are nest in the orange area up here, and then the yellow area is where they might be found later on after they get done with their nesting. So they are very far northern birds, and the orange is where they are for Pomeranian Jaeger. That's really about the size of a ring-billed gull, but they will chase anything bigger than them and bully it until it drops its food. This is Pomeranian, a parasitic Jaeger. This is where they nest even further north up here. And they get into the Gulf of Maine too. So we see Pomeranians mostly, a lot of parasitics. The one we almost never see is a long-tailed Jaeger. And I say that, but this last summer on that pelagic trip, we actually had a pair of these entertaining the boat too, which is the first I'd seen in Maine waters. Seen a bunch of them in Alaska, but this is the first time I'd seen them off the coast in the Gulf of Maine. And this is a long-tailed Jaeger, and they are also very far northern breeders. So they come down and they plunder other birds. They're not the only ones doing it. They have bigger cousins. This is the great skua. This is essentially an Arctic breeder that, or close to it, along Iceland. A lot of them in Iceland, some in Greenland, and you will see them over in the United Kingdom in the very far end of Scotland, and these islands up here, and then the top of Norway and Finland. They're up there, and that's a great skua. They are the size of a gull, and they can take food away from anything they want to. Then there's a South Polar skua that's the equivalent, about the same size, and they're nesting in Antarctica. Not even the mainland on any of the other continents. They are an Antarctic breeding bird, and they are all down here in this pink area along the edge of Antarctica, and they are coming into the Gulf of Maine. So we're seeing them on those pelagic trips later on in the summer. I'll talk briefly a little bit about what it's like in winter here, because we get all those birds in Canada that nest on fresh water. When that freezes, they got to go somewhere, and so they go south for the winter. And for a lot of them, we are the South. So we have 3 species of scoter that get into our waters, and you can see all these guys right off the coast right now in the Camden, Rockland area. So we have 3 scoter species, black scoter, very prevalent, especially as you get further north in Maine. There's a lot of them. If you get off to Cape Nettic, where the Neville Lighthouse is, you can see a flock of 1,000 at once. We get big flocks. This is black scoter. This is surf scoter. I think this is the one I see more often off the breakwater in Rockland, surf scoter. And then there's the white winged scoter, which is also off the coast of Maine. And I see those more in the southern Maine than I do in the northern Maine area, but they're all along the coast. So we have 3 species of scoter that are making our wintering grounds here in Maine. Harlequin ducks. These are freshwater nesters up in Canada. They have a talent for nesting on a rough freshwater river where no other bird will go. So the whitewater rivers is their favorite place. And then in the winter, they will come down off the coast and choose the areas that are most beaten by surf. The areas where, again, other birds don't dare to go. These harlequin ducks have a superpower, and that is that they heal fast. So they get broken bones in these surf areas pretty regularly. You autopsy one of these, you can see the breaks, but they heal so fast that they get over it almost immediately, or they can still, I don't know if the muscle binds around the bone or what, but they're able to keep going even after they've gotten beaten up. So they can access a food supply that nothing else can. And so we look for them in the rough areas along the coast in Maine. You might see them in the Rockland area. You certainly see them in southern coastal Maine. They are along the Marginal Way in Agunquit. They're off the Cliff House in York. They're off Cape Elizabeth, Two Light State Park, and they're off Schoodic Point. There's a colony that the biggest group, and it's been there for years, maybe hundreds at a time, are off the southern end of Isle Ho. And my Maine Audubon chapter takes a trip out there every late March in order to see this phenomenon. It was a threatened bird in Canada. The numbers have bounced back a little bit, so we're seeing them more and more. Used to be you could only see them by getting on a boat and going out in the Gulf of Maine to Isle Ho. Now they're showing up along the coastline in much bigger and more dependable numbers. So harlequin duck. Common loons, a lot of our loons, once the ice freezes up here, they just go out in the ocean. Loons will take 4 to 5 years to reach an age where they can compete for a territory inland. Until they reach that age, they could get beaten up by trying to share it with a breeding pair. So a lot of them just stay out in the winter and summer out in the Gulf of Maine all the time. And that's why you see saltwater common loons regularly. And then, of course, when the lakes freeze up, a lot of them just go out there as well. So common loons are out in the Gulf, even out in deep water, but mostly a little closer to shore. And remember the great cormorant, that one nests in those islands out there, Seal Island being the most dominant place to find them. In the winter, they will actually come close to shore, and the double-crested cormorants will leave and go south, and these guys replace them along the shoreline. All that is changing now. The double-crested cormorants are coming back in. The great cormorants are moving out towards their islands. So all this is happening right now. Migration is underway, and these birds are starting to move around. There's been a big wave in the last week of the early migrating birds. I had birds show up in my yard yesterday that weren't here the day before. This is the time of year when the first 3 species of warbler come in: pine warbler, palm warbler, and yellow rumped warbler, all come in around the 3rd weekend of April. Other birds will be coming along, other warblers somewhere around May 1st. Swamp sparrows are coming in now, northern flickers, yellow-bellied sapsuckers. Migration is underway. So John did ask me to mention there are resources these days for people who want to watch this phenomenon. There's something called Birdcast, which you can look up. It's a collaboration with the Cornell School of Ornithology and Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And it will make predictions about where you are and what the weather is going to be like, to know which nights are going to be really heavy migration nights. And to give you some idea, I think it was last Thursday or Friday night, weather radar picked up 2 million birds crossing Penobscot County in Maine. Then the following night, only 3,000 birds were picked up because of the bad weather that came in on Saturday. So there's a Birdcast thing out there where you can actually watch migration and know it's about to happen. With the database they built up from that, there's now something called Bird Flow, which is a pictorial description of what this looks like. Before now, a lot of these birds nest at night or migrate at night, and you could never really see this migration until it popped into your backyard. But with all this new scientific information and all this data they get from eBird reports that people send in when they see stuff, and all those weather radar reports, they now have a very accurate picture of where the birds are coming from, where they're going, and where they stop along the way. You can actually watch something they've generated, which shows you what the migration really looks like. And it's unbelievably spectacular. Billions of birds flowing out from as far as South America and the southern tip of Argentina, all the way up here and into Canada. It's an amazing thing to see. Migration season is really exciting, and it's just beginning now. In Maine, it peaks somewhere around the middle of May until the first week of June. And get ready for it because it's here. The last thing I'll leave you with is all the talk about the Gulf of Maine being cold is in the process of changing a little too quickly. We are in the top 1% of the fastest warming bodies of water on Earth. Because that water is somewhat sheltered, was being fed by the currents of the Labrador currents, it is now almost heating up like a bathtub, and water is starting to flow in a little more from the Gulf Stream. So we are seeing the water heat up. We're seeing that affect the food supply in the Gulf. That has had effects on some of the puffin colonies. The whales are dispersing more. We used to get right whales more than we do now, and I didn't mention them earlier, but right whales can be here. Most of them are going up a little further north now into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. There was a big supply of food off Cape Cod this winter, and a lot of them. One of the biggest concentrations of the critically endangered right whale was actually off Cape Cod for much of the winter. So like to think that's encouraging. It probably isn't. So that's my presentation. And the last thing is I do have a YouTube channel. I rush through this off in a big hurry, but if you look up Bob Duchesne or even just Maine birding on YouTube, you will find a video that's very much the same content that I just gave you now. So you can watch that at your leisure and study up and get yourself out to what I consider to be the ocean Serengeti of the universe. There's so much wildlife out there that people never see just because they didn't know they could. There's lots of boats that go out there. Bar Harbor Whale Watch is probably my favorite for getting into deep water. Get on a boat, see what you're missing. And I will stop sharing there and see if there are questions.
Yes, Bob, fabulous. And thank you again. That was wonderful. There are a few questions in the Q&A, and we have a couple of minutes if you'd like to put any questions in there. So I could read one to you. Hi, Bob. What is the best place to alert local birders to a sighting? We live on the river and
Oh,
people
yeah.
are waiting to see the black-necked stilt. We could let them know, is that a rare bird?
It's rare in Maine. This is the first one I've heard of it being in Maine. And remember, I wrote the guidebook. for, that's not uncommon further south of here. If in Florida, you would see them easily. In Texas, you would see them easily. But I don't know what that bird is doing up here. But the best resource, the one there's two resources. There's eBird, which I talked about before, which is the free app that you can download from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And that's what people oftentimes these days use to record their sightings, and it automatically keeps your lists in your database for you. So it keeps any list you want, and even keeps a list of everything you've seen in your lifetime. So eBird is one of them. Maine Audubon runs an email service that is instantaneous. You post something there and it sends out right away. It's a Google listserv, and that's accessible on the MaineAudubon.org website. So you can always post up your sightings on that, and that'll broadcast it to anybody else who's on that, and it's a big number. There's also maybe a famously large Maine bird group on Facebook, and a lot of people post their photos and sightings there. They're very sensitive about posting locations of rare or sensitive animals, but that's a place where people can really post a lot of information about birds they're seeing. So Maine Birds on Facebook, the Maine Audubon page, and eBird are the three big places to go.
Would you think iNaturalist for seabirds or mostly land birds?
Honestly, I have not had much experience with iNaturalist. And part of the problem, and I don't want this to sound like bragging, but I've been doing this so long that I seldom have to look at a book or an app or anything these days.
Yep.
So I just don't really use some of the resources that are available.
Sure. No, I remember one of your videos, you leave the book in the truck.
Yes. Yep. And for that reason, I always say, if you want to learn the birds, don't rely on the book. Don't look at the book, look at the birds, study what you're seeing, and then and I'll do that to the extent that I won't even take it in a place I've never been before. It just makes me look.
Yeah. And I teach the kids that.
Yeah.
Because the bird's history, by the time you find it in the book.
Exactly.
Find 3 or 4 different things. Does it have a bar or a yellow front? Okay. Next question. Who names the whales?
I wish I could remember off the top of my head who names it. The College of the Atlantic is associated with the whale watching in the Gulf of Maine, and so they're associated with the naming process. But it's a bunch of sea biologists. I think the process used to involve getting together socially over beer and naming them, and it may still be the case. But it's a ceremony they go through. They collect all these photos of the undersea tails, and then they name it based on the pattern they think they see. And it's a social process of these scientists who do it. And I wish I could remember the name.
Kind of like a Rorschach test.
It really is. It very much is.
Let's see. That fall trip you took, what was the name of the boat and out of what harbor? Thanks.
Yes, that's Bar Harbor Whale Watch. They have the biggest, fastest whale watch. In fact, they have the 2 biggest, fastest whale watch boats in North America. And they're chartered every year by Maine Audubon in the fall to do a 1-day, 6-hour trip deeper into the Gulf of Maine. Ignoring the whales, they go after the birds. And this last year was mid-September, and it was one of the best that I've been on, because we were seeing birds. All 3 Jaegers. I've never been out there and gotten all 3 Jaegers. We had close-up sighting of the skua. And then a lot of these other pelagic birds were out there. So it's Bar Harbor Whale Watch. I go out there with them multiple times in the summer. I've started doing videos for them that they can use to promote their business as well. And so now they take me along free pretty regularly. Love that part. Um, so I work kind of closely together with them and get offshore regularly.
And is there a better time of the year to go out to see whales and puffins? I mean, if they go to the
Yeah,
Caribbean for the winter, but
right. Yeah, I would say so. The For the puffin boats start going out about the third weekend of May. There's a Deer Isle Stonington festival called Wings, Waves, Woods, which is the birding festival on the third weekend of May. And that's the first puffin trip that I know of. They go out that weekend. Then the following weekend, they start going out from Bar Harbor around Memorial Day weekend, and all the other boats start going out then. Um, if you want that iconic photo of puffins carrying food, all those herrings in the bill, you'd want to do it when the chicks are hatched, which is later in July. You've got to do it before, really, you want to get it done in July. By the second week of August, the puffins have fledged. The chicks have mostly left the island, and the adults are starting to leave the island. Most of the tours shut down around the second week of August. Whales, on the other hand, can take their time getting here, so the numbers will start to build up in the summer and last right into late fall. So for the second half of summer, for all those pelagic seabirds I was talking about, is better. They're coming in early in the season, as early as late May. The numbers build right into August and into mid-September, and then they start to filter out again as you get a little bit later on in September, or even after the first week of September, you start to see some of them leaving. So the timetable is a little different depending on what you want to see. For the marine mammal life, later summer is better. For some of those birds, June and July is really good.
okay. Let's see. Why is the Gulf heating so much?
Well, it's climate change. We may be in a period of time where we're going to deny it a little longer, but the temperature is going up. And with that, we're seeing a change in the fisheries a little bit. There's more warm water loving fish coming in. And some of those are butterfish that like the puffin chicks and the tern chicks can't eat. When we get one of those influxes of really warm water in the summer, that's when those colonies fail. So it's global warming.
And the gap in the Gulf, sort of north of the Georges Bank, that's where a lot of cold water comes in through.
Yeah.
And so that would possibly be a place you'd want to be.
Yeah, except it's like 300 miles out there, and the boats aren't going that far.
Right. Got it.
Bar Harbor Whale Watch, because it is big and fast, they can get out to 50 miles, and they do. If the whales aren't cooperating close to shore, they take a 5-hour trip to zip right out there to Grand Manan Banks, and almost never miss out there. So that's their fallback plan if they need it. But no other boat, none of the other Whale Watch boats can go that far.
Sure. Let's see. Gray seals are called singing seals. Have you ever heard them sing?
Yep, I have.
Okay.
It's like a dog moaning.
Okay.
I can't say it's really a musical.
Sure.
They have the same talent for singing that I do.
The last question that we have here, it's an answer. Humpback whale naming is coastalstudies.org. And then there's r/r-work/humpback whale. Mm-hmm. But coastalstudies.org.
Yeah, and I guess that link would be in the chat group if anyone wants to click on it.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. Bob, thank you so very much. My
pleasure.
Wonderful, and hope you will speak again next year. And it'd be wonderful. Do you ever go with people out on these boats, or you just go by yourself?
Yeah, as I say, I go. I guide or spotter, whatever, for the Isle Ho ferry several times this summer. I know I'll do it in mid-July. There's probably a couple of Wednesday trips they need before, so I do that. I'm going to be part of the crew for a big island and ocean birding event that Bar Harbor Whale Watch is going to do in late July, sometime in July. There's a big lighthouse tour they're going to do, going all the way up to Grand Manan, and they'll hit a bunch of lighthouses and then cross the Gulf of Maine, looking for all these birds and whales. That's a grand trip, and I'll be one of the spotters for that.
Wonderful. Do you want to mention the Bangor Daily News on Friday?
Yeah, I talked about the resources for migration that's available now. I actually wrote a column for the Bangor Daily News. My weekly column is going to talk about the bird cast and the bird flow that I was describing earlier on. Once again, this is the time to get excited. The birds kind of sneak in because they're nocturnal. They fly at night because it's safer, cooler, and easier, and they wait for a good tailwind. And so it's very episodic. You know ahead of time when you might get a big flight, and then all of a sudden they're all over your yard where they weren't there the previous day. So this is an exciting time, and those resources will be in the column tomorrow.
Excellent, excellent.
Yep.
Well, thank you very, very much, and we'll be in touch. And have a great summer.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Sure, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining Mary Spring Nature Center's recorded Tuesday talks. For more information, please visit maryspring.org. We hope you'll consider supporting Mary Spring. You can donate securely at maryspring.org. Give the office a call at 207-236-2239 or mail your check to Mary Spring Nature Center, P.O. Box 893, Camden, Maine 04843, and make your check payable to Mary Spring Nature Center. Thank you, and we hope to see you again.